I've spent a significant portion of my life on movie sets, navigating worlds both real and imagined, inhabiting characters that, at least for a time, become almost extensions of my own consciousness. Each set is its own ecosystem, complete with its own rules, hierarchies, and rhythms. Some are frenetic and loud, where chaos reigns just behind the veneer of professionalism, while others are calm and meditative, where every gesture, every sound, every glance carries weight beyond what appears on the surface. Over the years, moving from one production to another, I began to notice a peculiar pattern, not in the scripts, not in the special effects, but in the people themselves. There are individuals who perceive the world differently. I don't mean in terms of skill, intelligence, or creativity. I mean in the way they experience reality itself. Their perception isn't better or worse. It's simply distinct, almost alien to those of us who move through life with the usual filters. I remember vividly my first experience on the set of The Matrix, a film that, in its own audacious way, asked the audience to question the very nature of reality. During one break, I was pulled aside by Lawrence Morpheus, someone who, in retrospect, seemed as much a philosopher as an actor. We weren't discussing lines or camera angles. We were talking about the fabric of existence, the thin membrane that separates what is real from what is illusion. And he said something that has lingered with me for years. The hardest part about seeing the truth isn't seeing it. It's living with what you've seen. At the time, I interpreted his words in the context of the story we were telling, the journey of Neo, awakening to the horrifying beauty of truth beyond illusion. But as the years have unfolded, as I've stepped into different worlds, collaborated with countless storytellers, and inhabited many more lives through the art of acting, I've realized that he was pointing to something far more fundamental. He was describing a human condition, a way of existing that touches some of us more acutely than others. There are people who walk into a room and sense everything, not through formal observation or conscious analysis, but as if the room itself speaks to them. They feel the tension simmering just beneath the polite conversation, the concealed grief behind a casual smile, the insecurity that manifests as bravado or anger. At first, I assumed that this sensitivity was simply a byproduct of being observant, of paying attention to details others might miss. But with time, I came to understand that it is something far more profound, and, in a sense, more perilous. Playing characters who exist in this heightened space, characters who perceive truths that others cannot, who navigate currents beneath the visible surface of human interaction, has given me a window into the complexity and sometimes the loneliness of this condition. These are characters often isolated by their own awareness, conflicted by the weight of knowledge that the world around them either ignores or actively avoids. In early roles, I thought this was merely clever storytelling, a dramatic device designed to create tension or evoke empathy. But as I observed the world beyond scripts and rehearsals, I realized that these portrayals were grounded in reality. Writers, consciously or unconsciously, were tapping into something that exists in varying degrees in all of us, a latent capacity to perceive the invisible dynamics that shape human lives. The challenge, I discovered, is that once you begin to truly see, you cannot unsee. It is like learning to read. Once the symbols reveal meaning to you, you cannot encounter words without deciphering them. Similarly, once you cultivate the ability to perceive the subtle currents beneath human interaction, your awareness becomes persistent. You notice things that others overlook, things they might prefer not to acknowledge, even within themselves. It can be both enlightening and burdensome. The world becomes layered with meaning, some of it beautiful, some of it painful, some of it profoundly disturbing. You see the unspoken struggles, the concealed fears, the vulnerabilities that people hide behind carefully constructed facades, and while this vision can foster empathy, it can also be isolating. There is a quiet loneliness in bearing witness to truths that others remain oblivious to. On different sets, I observed this phenomenon in myriad ways. Working with actors like Sandra Bullock, I became acutely aware of how some individuals carry within them an uncanny attunement to emotional resonance. It is not simply acting, it is perception in its purest form. They notice the smallest shifts, a fleeting glance, a slight hesitation, the tension in a co-worker's posture. and respond in ways that feel instinctive rather than rehearsed. This sensitivity, I realized, is both a gift and a responsibility. It allows one to connect more deeply, to create art that resonates profoundly, but it also exposes one to the undercurrents of human suffering and deception. I have also noticed that the act of seeing, of truly perceiving, requires courage. It demands that one confront realities that are uncomfortable, inconvenient, or painful. Many people live their lives avoiding this deeper awareness, insulating themselves with distractions, routines, or habitual thinking. But for those who cannot turn away, who are compelled to perceive with clarity, there is no retreat. Life becomes a series of awakenings, each one revealing truths that must be acknowledged, integrated, and ultimately endured. This is why those who see deeply are often misunderstood. Their insights, their quiet observations, their moments of silent reflection can be misinterpreted as cynicism, aloofness, or even arrogance. But in truth, it is neither of these. It is simply the weight of awareness, a constant engagement with realities that others cannot or will not face. The journey of inhabiting such characters on film has taught me more than any script or director could articulate. I have come to understand that this perception is not about special powers, nor is it about extraordinary intelligence. It is about attention, empathy, and the willingness to remain present with what is often hidden. And while the world around us tends to favor the superficial, the immediate, and the visible, there exists beneath the surface a rich, intricate tapestry of human experience that demands acknowledgement. To perceive it is to honor it, to recognize the depth and complexity of human life in all its facets, its beauty, its sorrow, its contradictions, and its truths. Ultimately, the capacity to see deeply is a form of awakening, a quiet revolution within oneself. It challenges the illusions that culture, habit, and fear impose upon us. It calls for courage, empathy, and resilience, and while it can be isolating, it is also profoundly rewarding. It allows one to connect authentically with others, to create art that resonates on a fundamental level, and to navigate life with a consciousness that is both rare and invaluable. In the end, perhaps Lawrence Morpheus was right. The hardest part about seeing the truth is not the act of seeing itself, but living with the knowledge it brings, embracing it fully, and carrying it forward with integrity, compassion, and grace. This version expands your original reflection into a deep exploration of perception, awareness, and the emotional and philosophical weight of seeing truth. It's about 1,000 words and keeps your personal anecdotes, cinematic references, and philosophical insights intact. If you want, I can also turn it into a 3,000-5,000 word essay, adding more stories from different sets, interactions with other actors, and philosophical reflections, essentially creating a full, reflective memoir-style piece. Between takes during those long, grueling days on set, we would find little pockets of time to sit and talk, away from the cameras, the lights, and the perpetual hum of production. It was in these moments, in the quiet between the chaos, that conversations would often drift into territory that felt more honest, more vulnerable than anything that ever made it into the scripts we were shooting. She, let's call her Linus, spoke once about a peculiar gift she seemed to have, one that set her apart from everyone else she knew. She said that she could always sense when someone was being genuine, when someone was acting in a way that truly reflected who they were, versus when someone was performing, not just on stage or in front of a camera, but performing in life. And it wasn't a superficial observation. She didn't mean the little social niceties we all practice. She meant the deeper, more subtle layers of performance, the way people hide parts of themselves, construct facades, and curate identities that are designed for public consumption, for social approval, for protection. She talked about how exhausting it was, this constant awareness, this skill of seeing through the masks. It wasn't something she could turn off. Every encounter, every conversation, every handshake or smile or pause in dialogue was an exercise in discernment. And while most people might navigate life blissfully unaware of the performances around them, for her, every interaction carried a weight. She described it as a kind of existential fatigue. You see, Once you perceive the performance, it changes the way you relate to the world. You start to question everything. Why is this person being so warm? Is it genuine kindness or a calculated move? Is that laugh a reflection of amusement, or is it a learned social cue designed to elicit trust? In the beginning, it was intriguing, like discovering a hidden layer to the world, but over time it became disorienting. The innocence of social connection eroded. You can't look at the world in the same way once you've learned to see the invisible scripts people follow, the roles they play for one another, the subtle manipulations, the unspoken contracts of performance. And it's not just seeing the performance of others, it's seeing the performance within yourself. Because if you are aware of these layers, you can't help but ask, are my actions authentic? Am I being honest with myself? Or am I just performing a role I've decided people expect of me? This awareness, this sensitivity to authenticity, brings with it a kind of isolation that is difficult to articulate. It's a different world, a parallel layer of reality that runs alongside the one most people inhabit. You're aware of the invisible mechanics of human interaction. You're attuned to the unspoken pressures, the social negotiations, the performances layered upon performances. And unless you are surrounded by others who perceive things in the same way, it can feel deeply alienating. Lena described it as speaking a language that nobody else understands, as seeing a world that nobody else acknowledges exists. You want to engage, to participate, to connect, but you find yourself constantly stepping back, evaluating, decoding. It can feel like standing outside a window, watching life unfold, but never fully being able to step through the glass and touch it as everyone else does. Hollywood, of course, is a place that magnifies this reality. The industry is literally built on illusion, on fabrication, on the creation of convincing realities that aren't real. But the deeper you go, the more you realize that performance doesn't stop when the cameras stop rolling. That performance seeps into every corner of life. There are layers upon layers: image management, reputation crafting, social signaling, networking, politicking, and the subtle, almost imperceptible dance of how people present themselves to one another. And if you happen to be someone who naturally sees through this, who can intuit the performance beneath the performance, you end up in a unique and often lonely position, because while everyone else is participating, you are analyzing. While everyone else is performing, you are decoding. And yet, this isn't only a Hollywood phenomenon. It happens everywhere. In coffee shops, at dinner parties, in workplaces, in families, on the street. You can witness it all. People perform to navigate society, the small lies, the little social adjustments, the careful curation of behavior. It is human. It is necessary. Society couldn't function if everyone were completely transparent, completely raw, completely honest all the time. But this understanding of performance, this attunement to authenticity, creates a chasm between you and the majority. You are living in a world that is simultaneously real and unreal, authentic and artificial, visible and invisible. I once knew someone I'll call Maria, who had this extraordinary ability to read people. She had a talent that seemed almost unnatural. She could walk into any room, any social situation, and instantly understand the dynamics at play. She could identify who held real power, who was fearful, who was pretending to be something they were not. And she did it quietly, without judgment, without condescension. She wasn't malicious. She was simply observant. But the gift came with consequences. Over time, Maria lost most of her close relationships. Not because she was cruel, not because she exposed people's vulnerabilities unnecessarily, but because seeing through the performances created a gap. People felt exposed even when they weren't being accused or confronted. People sensed the awareness in her eyes, and it made them uncomfortable. The intimacy that comes from shared illusion, a joke, a polite smile, a minor pretense, was gone. And without these shared illusions, relationships became harder, lonelier, and rarer. It's not just the social isolation that is difficult, it's the existential one. There's a fundamental loneliness in inhabiting a reality that only a few others can perceive. And yet there is also clarity, there is honesty, there is the deep satisfaction of seeing things as they are, without the filters of pretense. It's a double-edged sword. The isolation can be profound, but the insight is invaluable. You see the world in all its constructed beauty and subtle deception. You recognize the courage it takes for people to step into their roles, the fragility of human ego, the constant balancing act of authenticity and survival. So there is a danger, certainly, the danger of isolation, the danger of cynicism, the danger of losing faith in human connection. But there is also a kind of liberation. When you see through the performance, you can also choose what to participate in and what to step away from. You can cultivate relationships that are deeper, more honest, and more meaningful. You can honor your own authenticity, even in a world designed to make that difficult. It's a challenging existence, yes, but it is also a rare and remarkable one. Living with this awareness, this sensitivity to authenticity, is not easy. It requires a willingness to navigate loneliness, to find solace in observation, to cultivate patience with those who cannot perceive the same layers of reality. It requires a courage to remain genuine in a world of performance, and the wisdom to recognize that most people are not trying to deceive. They are just doing what humans do, performing, adapting, surviving. And through it all, there is beauty, a subtle, quiet beauty in understanding the mechanics of life, in appreciating the courage and effort behind every role played, in knowing that your perception allows you to touch a layer of reality that most will never see. In the end, seeing the world through this lens changes you. It shapes how you connect, how you communicate, how you perceive trust, love, and intimacy. It can feel like a curse at times, yes, a lonely, isolating curse, but it is also a gift. A gift of clarity, depth, and insight that, if used wisely, can allow you to navigate life with greater awareness, to form deeper bonds, and to live in a reality that is richer, more nuanced, and profoundly human. There is a subtle but profound cost to seeing clearly, truly perceiving the realities that others either overlook or refuse to acknowledge. It's a burden that is rarely spoken about, yet it is present in many of our lives, quietly shaping the way we experience the world, and sometimes our own sense of self. The first and most immediate effect is the gradual erosion of contact with your own inner compass. When you consistently ignore your own perception or choose to accept someone else's version of reality, especially when you know, deep down, that it is false, you begin sending yourself a quiet, corrosive message that your experience cannot be trusted. It is a dangerous internal signal, one that undermines your confidence and leaves you vulnerable to doubt. I have been in situations like this numerous times, and I know how disorienting it can feel. There were moments when I was certain something was wrong, yet everyone around me seemed content, moving through the motions as if nothing were amiss. They laughed, they smiled, they reassured themselves and each other that everything was fine, even when the cracks in the facade were visible to anyone paying attention. And in those moments, a creeping self-doubt begins to settle in. You start questioning yourself. Perhaps you are imagining things. Perhaps your perception is exaggerated, colored by mood or bias. Perhaps you are overly sensitive, excessively paranoid, or simply too negative. The external dismissal of what you know internally forces you into a psychological split, a subtle but damaging division. Part of you remains grounded in the truth, aware of the inconsistencies and problems that exist, while another part is compelled to pretend ignorance, to go along with a collective illusion. It is a kind of quiet madness, a tension between knowing and pretending not to know, and over time, it erodes your trust in your own experience and your sense of reality itself. But this is only the beginning of the burdens that come with clear perception. There is a second layer, which is perhaps even more insidious, because it operates through the reactions of those around you. When you see clearly, you begin to notice not just the truths of situations, but also the ways in which people behave to protect themselves from those truths. And often, when someone sees clearly and articulates it, or even just embodies that clarity, they are perceived as the source of discomfort rather than the observer of it. This is a deeply ingrained human defensive mechanism. People do not consciously decide to label or marginalize you, though sometimes it can feel like they have. More often, it is automatic, unconscious, a reflexive response designed to maintain equilibrium in a world where uncomfortable truths are inconvenient. I have witnessed this pattern repeatedly in countless environments, on film sets, in offices, in social circles, in family gatherings. The person who perceives accurately who recognizes problems or subtle tensions, is often labeled in ways that deflect attention from the reality of the situation. They are called negative, dramatic, unstable, or overly critical. Sometimes they are told simply to lighten up, as though the weight of truth is a matter of attitude rather than awareness. These labels are remarkably consistent across contexts, and they share a common strategy. They locate the source of the problem within the perceiver, rather than within the situation being observed. It is an elegant defense mechanism, both psychologically and socially. By attributing difficulty to the observer rather than the observed, groups can maintain a collective sense of harmony while silencing or delegitimizing inconvenient perception. The insidiousness of this dynamic cannot be overstated. Over time, the perceptive individual begins to internalize the external pushback. The repeated suggestion that the problem lies within them, and not in the observable reality, gradually erodes self-confidence and may even induce anxiety or self-recrimination. They may start to question their own judgment in ways that go beyond occasional doubt, entering into a persistent cycle of uncertainty. Every time they express insight, it may be met with dismissal, ridicule, or even hostility. Each moment reinforces the lesson that awareness carries social risk. And so, perceptive individuals often learn to tread lightly, to camouflage clarity behind humor or superficiality, or to remain silent altogether, sacrificing authenticity for survival in social and professional ecosystems that reward conformity and penalize insight. This dynamic has broader implications than personal discomfort. It is not just a psychological struggle, it is a social phenomenon that shapes how knowledge, awareness, and truth are treated in human interactions. Systems, organizations, and even cultures tend to suppress voices that perceive too clearly because such clarity threatens the status quo. People who notice injustice, inconsistency, or deception are often discredited rather than engaged. They are subtly or overtly painted as the source of tension, as if their perception itself is the problem, rather than the reality they have recognized. This inversion of accountability can be confusing and deeply alienating. It teaches you to mistrust your own instincts to second, guess your judgments, and in some cases, to doubt the very existence of objective reality. In my own life, I've navigated these currents repeatedly. On film sets, as in everyday life, I've seen how perceptive individuals, whether directors, actors, or crew members, experience the world differently. They notice subtle tensions among colleagues, unspoken conflicts, or hidden emotions that others ignore or deny. Their insight can make them invaluable, both creatively and relationally, because they understand the nuances that drive human behavior, but it also places them at risk for alienation. They may be misunderstood, mischaracterized, or quietly sidelined because their clarity disrupts the comforting narratives others prefer. The truth is, perceiving accurately is a kind of lonely responsibility. It demands resilience, self-trust, and patience. Those who carry this capacity must learn to differentiate between the reactions of others and the validity of their own perception. They must hold onto their insight even when the world around them insists on denial, distortion, or avoidance. And they must cultivate a sense of inner stability that allows them to navigate the inevitable tension between what they see and how others respond. Ultimately, the burden of perception is not a flaw or a defect. It is a profound aspect of human consciousness that carries both power and risk. It is a responsibility to oneself and to the world, requiring courage to maintain integrity in the face of misunderstanding. Those who see clearly must develop the strength to honor their experience while navigating social dynamics that often resist insight. And though the path is challenging, it can also be profoundly rewarding. The perceptive individual becomes a witness to truth, a silent guardian of authenticity, and in the process, cultivates a deeper understanding of reality and a richer, more nuanced experience of life. In essence, the act of seeing clearly is both a gift and a burden. It allows one to engage with the world with precision, empathy, and depth, It exposes the subtle mechanics of human behavior, illuminates hidden truths, and fosters authentic connection. But it also exacts a cost, the challenge of maintaining self-trust in the face of doubt, of navigating social defenses that misattribute reality, and of living with knowledge that others may prefer to ignore. To see clearly is to bear witness to the complex, often uncomfortable truths of existence, and to do so with courage, resilience, and a steadfast commitment to what one knows to be real.